and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be doing a tips video, a plant care video, how to care for a plant, which normally, I will be honest, this is a plant channel, but I don't normally do specific plant care, like specific to one plant, I should say. Normally I don't do, specific types of plant care. I have shared my plant care for my various genuses overall, but we are going to be talking about one specific plant today, and that is the Philodendron Billietiae. If you are new here, welcome. Again, this is a channel where I talk about plants, get handed lamps. That rhymed. Anyways, this is a channel where I talk about houseplants and do DIYs, so if you haven't, be sure to subscribe so you can be up to date on all my latest videos. If you are a recurring viewer, thank you so much and coming back for another video. So we're gonna try to do this because I've already tried to do it 3 times. Okay, I've already tried to talk about this plant 3 times and I have failed on audio. I'm trying to get better. So we are going to do it. And I brought sticky notes with me because the first time I went on a wild trail of who knows what. So I'm going to be concise and I'm going to get this out so that you can know how to care for this beautiful, unique plant. To start off, this again is the Philodendron Billietiae, and so it comes from Brazil. So it's a tropical plant, just like 90% of your house plants. That means that usually it likes a lot of humidity. However, for this plant specifically, I have never had a humidity issue. There are some philodendron in my collection that I absolutely have to have in higher humidity, or else they will start to deteriorate, their foliage will, and they will just not grow as well. But this guy, he does not mind having no humidity. I do not have a humidifier by it in the room, nothing. So this is a low loving humidity plant, or a low tolerating humidity plant. What I thought was interesting about this plant is I knew it was a climber. So again, there are philodendrons that are climbers or trailers or crawlers. And so this is a climber, meaning it climbs up things. If you put it on a moss pole, a plank, it will attach itself into the plank and therefore grow up. But what was interesting about this when I was researching it, because I just wanted more information on it, apparently they are hemiepiphytic. So I've never heard that terminology before. I did not know what that meant. And so apparently it means that they start off in the canopies of the trees and they sprout there, and then they send down their aerial roots to the ground and attach themselves in, which I thought that was fascinating. So technically, you do not need to grow it in a pot like this. You could grow it directly on something, again, just directly on a moss pole or coco coir, whatever that may be, and it will attach itself and grow. So I thought that was really fascinating because, again, epiphytic plants, that is when they grow on things. And so I have never heard of a hemiepiphytic. I guess that's what a lot of these philodendron are then, is hemiepiphytic, because they can grow in the ground and on things, but I don't know, maybe not. So somebody who knows more information about that can leave it in the comments. Epiphytic plant, which means that they grow on things, so they love to grow up it, and it will encourage them to grow larger foliage. So if you are looking for this plant to grow bigger, I would try attaching it to a moss pole. You can do it immediately. I know a common question is, when do I attach my plants to a pole? You can start it when it is a baby, and the sooner you start it, I feel like the easier it is, because sometimes when you get a larger plant that is a mother plant, which is just a bigger, more mature plant, the aerial roots on the bottom of the plant are not going to attach the same way that a fresh aerial root at the new growth point will. And so I always say, do it as soon as you can. Start it on a moss pole if you know it's a climber. And that way it can just automatically know, like, hey, I'm going to attach here and I'm going to grow up. I thought that was fascinating. Hemiepiphytic, not something that I've heard about. The hemi part. Epiphytic, yes, but hemi, never heard of before. And all that to say is they are a climbing plant. So these plants apparently, which was fascinating too, were discovered in like the 80s. Somebody can correct me, but apparently it was confused with a Philodendron Burley Marx, which I have a variegated Philodendron Burley Marx, which is this right here. And they do have the same like rigid leaves, not rigid, ripple like in their leaves and their foliage. You can see like the light right here. It's because they're ribbed. They are like wavy, and it's the same thing for the Burley Marks. However, you'll notice the Burley Marks is very bubbly and round, and this is very sphere-like, very sharp, and like sharp-edged, and just very defined. So are a few differences there with those guys. The other difference is these guys' petioles are orange, and so I have a video that I will show it up close, but their petioles are these, what the leaf is growing off of. So this right here, it is orange along with their veining, but on the bottom of their leaves, sorry, I'll get it together. Along with the veining on the back of their foliage is this like really pretty neon orange, and then the front is this really pretty chartreuse green that you see. Now, what is also fascinating is these leaves are like outlined in that orange color, and it's just so pretty because the light hits it and you can barely see like just a faint line. It looks like it's outlined, like it's glowing a little bit. They are super funky. I have seen these in a really large form, and they grow everywhere if you don't give them something to climb. They are just kind of one of those plants that they just kind of are bizarre. I don't know how to explain it, but if you look at my plant up close, like this one specifically here, the petiole is not straight. It is very like crooked and just wavy, and it's the same for all of these. It's just a really fascinating, unique plant, and I really love the foliage of it. So that is what drew me towards it. So when I got this, I purchased it in March of 2023, I believe. It came as a 4-inch plant, and so it was not near as large as this in their foliage, and it has grown a lot. This is now in a 10-inch round pot. I have had to repot it several times. So this is my one tip to you now that I've had this plant for a year, is they are sensitive to being root bound. So you will know that your plant needs to be repotted or potted up, I should say, based on how the foliage is reacting. Are they dying off? Are the leaves dying off? Are they yellowing? Are you having to water it probably way more frequent than you normally do? I would say a frequency of watering usually in the summer is maybe every week, depending on your pot size. For smaller pots, it probably is every week. In the winter, every 2 weeks. And so if you are watering it more often than that time frame, I would say you should probably check the roots. It might need to be repotted. I also will tell you that these aerial roots grow like crazy. So I had an aerial root on this plant that was growing all the way around the pot, and it was very thick. Those eventually will grow secondary roots, and that's what will help root into the ground. But you can just stick those back in the pot. They're not gonna hurt anything being out, but you can, if you want, just stick them back in the pot and it'll be okay. But you might see roots growing out the bottom. So I encourage you to always have a drainage hole, at least one on your plants pots. But I had this guy in a nursery pot, and the roots were just coming out the bottom like crazy. And that's how it always was. It grows really fast in my experience. And so I was having to repot it quite often, I feel like, for the first year of it, to be fairly honest. And so you will notice that, yes, the leaves will start to get stressed out. I've not had any plant do that is like root bound, normally doesn't stress out like that. But this guy really started telling me and started dropping leaves. And so I knew something was wrong. And so if you notice that and it's not your watering, I think you would be safe to repot it and pot it into a size up, which is usually 2 inches. That is when you know your plant needs to be repotted. I keep mine in a very chunky soil mix. So this is coco coir, perlite, pumice, just a bunch of well-draining materials, but as well materials that actually hold onto water. And so I think that that's really important to not cause root rot. In your home, plants can easily get root rot, fungus gnats from the soil that you use. And so when you use something that is a more well-draining, soil-free, it's kind of going to eliminate those issues. And so that is what I use. That is what it's always been potted in. As soon as I got it and needed to be repotted up the first time, I potted it up into my soil mix, which I do sell on my Etsy, and I will link it below while I remove the cat. So I would say definitely a well-draining soil mix. So why also a well-draining soil mix is because it's going to mimic their natural habitat. These plants are not in soil. Remember, they are epiphytic, which means that they grow on things and up. So they are not constantly sitting in soil and constantly be getting the water. They get it when they need to by the root system and goes up, but you definitely don't want to drown these guys in just stagnant soil. So watering, I kind of touched on it. It honestly is going to depend on your pot size and what soil you're in. My soilless mix, again, I am watering every week in the summer and every 2 weeks in the winter time. Now, what you want to look for when watering is when the plant is completely dry. Again, you do not want to cause root rot and fungus gnat issues, and these guys can stand to dry out. They don't mind going a day or two on the dry side. So normally what I do is I pick them up, and if the pot feels like I can throw it, then I need to water it. This pot is heavy. This is a full-on ceramic pot, and so it's a little bit more difficult to tell, but I can still tell, like, just based on how heavy it is. If you want, you can use a moisture meter, but I would suggest if you use that you were checking around the entire pot, not just in one place. I think that that's a common, missed thing, is that they're just checking in one spot and it's dry, but the whole other side of it could be wet. So I would definitely do, due diligence and check all around the pot. So the biggest part of this guy, and I think that helped with his growth, is light. So he has spent his entire life under a grow light. It started off here underneath these cabinets, which these are a Brina T5 grow light. I will link them in my description below. They are bought off of Amazon. They're only 5 watt, which means that they put off about 200 foot candles. I've tested this because I recently purchased a light meter. And so if you are curious to see what your light source is giving, you can go ahead and get a light meter from Amazon. I'll link this one below, and check the light. But it's really easy. You just turn it on, change the unit to FC, which is foot candles, and literally stick it. I stick it by my plant, where my plant is, so that I can see where it's getting not where it is getting growth from, but these leaves are actually higher. So yes, this one is at 200 right now. So it's like 198 down below and then 200 right up close. But that's what this guy was sitting under, was 200 foot candles. And then it grew out of that spot, and I had to move it up to the top of my cabinet, which was under a Sansi 35 watt grow light. That's what it was getting underneath my grow lights. And I think that that's why it was growing so well, is because yes, these are low light tolerant. I have since moved it all around my house because it is in a larger pot that does not fit under here, and it does not fit up top anymore. So now I have it by a southwest facing window, which I did readings on that window, and it's actually a lower light situation that was taken at about 3:30. So not quite sunset yet, but I am also in Texas, by the way, United States. But that is typically where I would say to place your plants. If you don't have grow lights in a cabinet, all of that setup, I would typically say put them in a southwest facing window. That is where it gets the most consistent and light all day. And then you get that sun setting light, which is that really bright direct light. And so I would suggest putting your plant there. So these do not like direct light. I noticed that when mine was getting larger in the cubby and starting to get closer to the light, the leaves were actually bending completely away, kind of like an alocasia will do. It was bending completely away, and that means that your plant is getting too much light. So would not suggest any direct light. If you're going to give direct light, at least 2 to 3 hours max, because again, it will affect their foliage and their growth. Now, I did not know how much light these plants should typically get, so I went over to Houseplant Journal because he has a great chart. If you don't know this, I will also link it below, but he has a great chart put together of the typical light that plants require, houseplants require. And so he has quite a few genuses listed that he will give you directions on how much light they should be receiving for optimal growth, and the least amount of light that they should be growing in. And so the least amount of light, he said, for this guy was 200 foot candles, and then the optimal growing was at 400 foot candles. And so I am still not giving it 400 foot candles, okay? I'll be honest. If you want it to grow in its best way possible, I would definitely try to aim for 400 foot candles. Again, normally that means placing it in a south or west facing window if you are in the United States. Otherwise, it can take as low as 200-foot candles. Now, I thought was interesting is in a nursery, they get up to, I think, 1,500-foot candles. And so that's a pretty high light. But do remember that it's shade house, so there is covering. They're just getting a lot of, filtered light. And so our windows, they are already filtered and they hold back light. But if you have this outside, again, they can take up to 1,500-foot candles. Just make sure it's not direct light. So direct light means that the sun is physically shining on the leaves like it is full sun drenched. If it is a bright indirect light, it means that it's going to be pulled back at least, I would say, 6 feet back. No, that's not true. About 3 feet back, maybe, from a south or west facing window in my experience. Again, in my housing situation, the southwest facing window is a covered window, and so, or slightly covered, and so it doesn't get as full like southwest facing light as some houses can with like gigantic windows that are completely open. But for me, it's about 3 feet back, and it means that the leaves are fully lit, but they are not sun drenched. Like the sun is not shining directly on them. They are just a nice like glow about them. I don't know how to describe it. Maybe I should have taken a video to show that. But again, you just don't want that sun shining directly on them to where it's just like you can see it, like these things are shining. It's just a nice glow, I would say. One last thing before we go. The other thing that this guy you will notice maybe is they have a lot of extrafloral nectaries. So extrafloral nectaries is the sap that they use in the wild to call beneficial pests. But here in the house, they don't really need that. However, they still give it off. And so it is a sap that will be found on their petioles, which is the stem, like right here with the leaf, and on the foliage. You can find it on the top and the bottom of the foliage. So I noticed that specifically this and my Philodendron jungle boogie put off the most extrafloral nectaries. They do not harm the plant. You do not need to wipe them off. You can if you would like, but they are there. I don't know what else to say about them. Sometimes on my jungle boogie, if it gets to be too much, because I noticed that my jungle boogie really puts off the extrafloral nectaries, it will discolor the leaves. And this does as well. This discolors the petioles just a little bit, like the spots where the sap was and then dried up are more of a brown color. And so it freaked me out at first because I thought it was scale. But it is not, it is an extrafloral nectary. So if you think it's scale, make sure to treat with a pesticide. If it's not, or not a pesticide, insecticidal soap. But if it's not, if you treat it and it's still coming back and they are like pretty well consistent on the petioles and the underneath of the leaves, it's going to be extrafloral nectaries. Again, will not harm your plant. Do not need to worry about it, but they are there. They are sticky. So if you touch it, it is sticky. It's going to get on your hands. But I have not noticed a reaction to it to myself. And I have pretty sensitive, like I get reactions to plants, to like flowers and stuff like that. It's never caused an allergic reaction or anything like that to me when I've touched it, but it is really sticky and you will notice that the leaves look wet. So that is one thing on this guy that I found out about it, extrafloral nectaries. As far as pests, I have not had to deal with any pests on this. It seems to be pest resistant. It just seems to be okay with pests because I have had thrips. Last year I had a thrips outbreak. It was in the same room as the plant, which was my lovely Monstera, that got thrips, but it did not affect it. I have not had to deal with fungus gnats because I use my soil, not had to deal with mealybugs, nothing of the sort. But if you do have a pest or discover one, I use Jack's Dead Bug Brew as the spray. And then you can also use an insecticidal soap and dunk it if it's like a mealybug scale issue. But otherwise, I have found that it's just pretty easy going and has not given me any pest issues yet. So that was pretty much it. That was my short, quick video tips for the Philodendron Billietiae. Again, I've had this for a year now and I really love the plant. It is beautiful and unique, and it is awesome because they are coming to a store near you. I've seen them or seen people post about them being found in stores now versus last year. I feel like they were still difficult to find. I found mine in a 4-inch pot, and I was kind of surprised about that because the only other time I'd seen them is in really large form. And so definitely a beautiful plant. If you see this in your box store or your nursery, grab it. It is so fun and so easy. The only thing is just watch for them being root bound, but otherwise let them dry out. Give them a good amount of sun and give them a well-draining soil, maybe something to climb if you want them to grow really full and big, and you'll be set. I do not have mine on a moss pole because I don't want it to be on a moss pole. I'm going to see how it grows because I have, again, seen them in a larger form, and I like how crazy they go. I like how like untamed it kind of looks, and so that's what I'm hoping to grow this one into. But I am really happy with the growth that this has put out for me, how far it's come. I made my superlatives video, like the best and worst houseplants of 2023, as my just best easygoing houseplant, and it really is. So if you are looking for something unique that is colorful as well, pick this guy up. It's so fun, and it's a really great plant to add to your collection. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you have any additional tips for this guy in the comments, and make sure to subscribe, and we'll see you next time.